this experience that I went through, I never really paid much attention to this concept of the dark night of the soul. I didn't really understand it. I didn't necessarily believe that it was something that I would experience. But after looking into it, I discovered that every spiritual teacher that I've studied experienced it. And so it is inevitably part of the process. And I can understand it, really, because, you know, when you learn about these teachings and these practices, the learning of these teachings and practices is an intellectual experience, right? You know, you're learning about these concepts, right? And these concepts are very attractive because they're very logical, very reasonable, very realistic. They're very experiential. You know, you can take the concept and look at it in relationship to yourself and see its validity. It's hard to argue about its validity. I mean, how can you argue about its validity if you really look into it, if you really do an inquiry, if you do a self-inquiry and really look to see, are these things that these teachings, these concepts that these teachings are presenting, are they true? You know, it's very, very important to make the transition from the conceptual, intellectual understanding to a recognition that's an experiential recognition that's based in experience. And unless you do that, until you do that, you really don't leave the idea that this is just a conceptual understanding. And as a conceptual understanding, it might be interesting at a party to talk about. It might be an interesting parlor conversation, but it has no power. It's not going to transform your experience. It's not going to allow you to experience the transcendence that these teachings and practices are intended to bring to your attention, are intended to give you the power to experience. So in reality, I think it's really important, you know, anybody that hears these teachings and practices, I think it's very important to see if you're willing to look and ask yourself, am I willing to take this on? Am I willing to have this be something that I consider to be relevant, of significance, and have the kind of power and significance that could alter my experience of myself and my life? Because that's what this is all about. I mean, you know, if you're honest with yourself, and you're not deluding yourself or you're not distracting yourself, if you're willing to be honest with yourself and really pay attention to your mental activity as it relates to what's happening in your life, I don't think it's possible not to see, if you're being honest with yourself, that the life of the personality is a failed project. It cannot possibly work. It cannot possibly work because the basis of its activity is to try and manipulate reality, is it not? The basis of the activity of the personality is to attempt to manipulate reality. What's reality? Other people, circumstances, your body, even your mind, to attempt to manipulate your mind, you know, to get your mind to somehow change, to be more palatable, to be more pleasurable, to be less uncomfortable, the restlessness, the mental restlessness. And that restlessness is carried out in the nervous system. You know, the nervous system has been conditioned and trained from very early on to be a program that will survive you. That's what the nervous system is all about, right? Fight or flight, right? When the nervous system gets activated, when the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's screening all incoming data, whenever that picks up anything that's a threat, there's a concept they call the amygdala hijack, that you get hijacked into a survival modality and you begin to see the lens you begin to look through is the lens that has whatever is happening appear to you to be a threat to your existence. And when it occurs to you that way, the nervous system generates the release of adrenaline. It generates the thought processes that will be utilized to either attack the threat or get away from it. And if you look at your experience of your life as it relates particularly to other people, especially the people you're closest to, you can't deny this. You just can't deny it. And not only can you not deny it, but when it gets triggered, when it goes off and that adrenaline goes and that nervous system goes into fight or flight and it goes into the specific patterns that are a part of your unique conditioning, the way you as a person deal with threat. And that's unique to each person, right? There's a lot of generalized reality, but it's still relatively unique to each person. How do you behave when somebody says or does something around you that has you become angry, that has you become fearful, that has you start to think of ways? If you look at this, you can actually see your mind do it. Think of ways to counter it, right? What can I say back to this person that has attacked to make my attack a stronger attack than their attack? What can I do that will allow me to dominate? Because that's what you have to do. I mean, if you're under attack and you're feeling threatened in relationship to what's going on around you, what you will attempt to do is either dominate that situation or get away from it as quickly as possible. This is undeniable. It's just undeniable. If you're honest with yourself and you look at your own mental activity, if you're honest with yourself and you pay attention to your own body in terms of the reactions that occur in your own body, it's an undeniable reality. You know, and one of the things that I think happens for us so that the personality that is the identity we take ourselves to be, now watch, one of the things that happens for us so that the personality that is the identity that we take ourselves to be is not experienced in its rawest form, because if it was experienced in its rawest form, you'd be terrified. Do you understand? In its rawest form, meaning that you are experiencing yourself to be separate from everything else that exists. If you were experiencing that directly without any buffer, without anything that could lessen the impact of that, you'd be in terror. You'd be in terror, right? Everything would be terrifying to you because everything would occur to you to be a threat. That's the way the mechanism works. And so why is it that we're not experiencing this dark night of the soul? Why is it that all of us aren't experiencing this terror, right? And the reason is because the system also generates a buffer zone. And the buffer zone that it generates is called your story. Your personality is living in a story that it tells itself, right? Every day. If I ask you how it's going, you're going to tell me your story, right? And that story is the movie you're in. And the movie you're in, you're the star of the movie, right? And the movie you're in, you're attempting to have all of the plot of that movie and all of the supporting actors, right, conform to the drama and conform to the script that you generate. Isn't it true? Isn't it true that you're generating a script called your life, and that's a story you're living your life in, and you're preoccupied with the story, right? And because you're preoccupied with the story, you don't experience the raw experience of being a separate self. You experience a story about your life as a separate self. And in that story, every day you're living your life in such a way to try and forward the process of your being in control, to forward the process of your being able to avoid being dominated and to dominate reality and to dominate other people. And it's not something you're doing consciously, it's conditioning. It's the conditioned experience of being human, is to wake up in the morning and think of your life as this is going to be the next chapter of my story. And what will this chapter of my story be about? It'll be about what I do today in order for me to feel more secure. It'll be about what I do today in order for me to feel more in control. It'll be about what I do today to be more getting along in the process of pursuing happiness. It'll be about what I do today to get along in terms of building security to protect me against the threats of life. And one of the ways that that's done pretty commonly is with money, right? The more money I have, the more secure that I'll be, because I can dominate and control more of reality with the money, right? And we have to deny the evidence to continue to do this, right? Because the evidence is obvious. I mean, if you look at the people who have done that and who supposedly have enough money to control reality, at least to a much larger extent than you and I do, if you pay close attention to them, they are not happy. They're still scared. They're still actively getting up in the morning and trying to figure out what to do next, because the money didn't work. And if the money didn't work, what am I going to do now? Maybe if the money didn't work, maybe it's power in terms of my having fame and control of power, like being in control of a country. That might be the next answer to the money, to have power, right? Okay, good. Then look at the people who've accomplished that. They look pretty nervous to me. They don't look like to me that they don't look like little Buddhas to me, right? So the evidence is undeniably the case if you just pay attention. In order to pay attention, you have to get out of your head. You have to get out of the idea that you know what's going on, that you're seeing things clearly, and see if you can allow yourself to have enough of an open mind to look and see things as they are. Here's an old story about a college professor that went to visit a Zen master, and they sat down to talk, and they had a brief conversation, and then the Zen master poured tea into the cup of the college professor and tea into his cup. And when he poured the tea into the college professor's cup, after the cup was full, he kept pouring, and it was running out all over the table. And the college professor said, "Why'd you do that?" And he said, "Well, you and the cup are the same. You're full. I can't put any more in." And that's the way a lot of people are living their life. I already know. Isn't it true? Yeah. Especially as we get older, right? When you talk to people, they already know, right? It's what the mind does is it uses the truth to present a lie. The truth is about who you really are. You have no age. The truth is about who you really are. You're the same age now as you were when you were 5 years old. If you look at that, you can see that's why it feels like I'm the same, right? And you are the same when you are experiencing your true nature, right? What the personality will do will use that to tell a lie. It'll use that to have you think that you still are that young until you're presented with the evidence. And when you're presented with the evidence, it's undeniable, just like I've been saying about everything else. When you see things as they are, you can't argue with it. You can't argue with reality, although most people are living their lives as if they can argue with reality. Get a nose job, get a different face, See, that's the thing. The truth is undeniable. The truth is irrefutable. The truth is unescapable. That's why, the Titanic that we're on is going to hit the iceberg. And the sooner you realize and recognize the fact that this is a very short-lived experience that we're having here. It's a very short-lived experience. You don't have time to mess around. You don't have time to keep playing these cards in your hand as if they're going to win the hand. They're not going to win the hand. It's a stacked deck. This is a stacked situation. It's not going to go any other way. The body is going to die. There's no way to escape that. The body is going to die. The thing about this that's so incredible and unbelievable is that the truth is, this is incredible and unbelievable. The truth is you're not going to die. That's the truth. And yet you would think that being the truth, that people would say, "Oh my God, tell me more," right? But they're not saying tell me more because they're still completely invested in the other story. Completely invested in the other story. You know, that I'm going to live as if I'm not going to die. Isn't that the way people are living their life? You can't be living as if you're going to die and behave the way you're behaving. You can't be. That can't be the case. If you're paying it. See, that's one of the things about meditation, is that if you can get the body to calm down enough, if you can get the mind to calm down enough, right, then you might be able to see what's in front of you, right? And instead of projecting the story, instead of projecting the thought processes, the interpretation of life and the interpretation of the world and the interpretation of what you are, instead of projecting that the way most people are, right? And then we're all in on the lie together. Yeah, we're all lying about it together, right? If we're all lying about it together, nobody's lying. Right? Well, unfortunately, no matter how many of us are lying about it together, it's still a lie. And the day is going to come when you're going to have to pay the piper. The day is going to come when you're going to have to face the reality of the short experience that you're having in a human life. That day can come at any time if you're willing. See, that's the thing. It's one thing to hear these teachings and hear these practices, but the question is, are you really willing to digest this? Are you really willing to take it all the way? Because if you're really willing to take it all the way, you have to be willing to experience the death of that which you took yourself to be. Yeah, the annihilation of what you took yourself to be. And it won't be pleasant. How could it be pleasant, right? How could it be pleasant to experience the death of what you believe you are? Because when you're experiencing the death of what you believe you are, you have to go through the disorientation, the confusion, the terror, the upset, the resistance, right? You have to go through that process, and it's an uncomfortable process. I had a kind of a dark night of the soul light. I had an experience of the dark night of the soul light where I felt like I was dying, but I wasn't terrified. You know, it just felt uncomfortable, right? And then it gradually passed, right? But that wasn't the whole story. That wasn't the whole process, right? The whole process has to be complete. You have to complete the death. You have to complete the death of the personality, right? And even though conceptually you may understand that death can't be that bad because it's the death of something that never existed in the first place, it won't matter because the nervous system that you have and the brain that you have doesn't buy that. The brain you have has been hypnotized into the idea that you are. The hardest thing for you to get out of in this life is your identification with your body. The hardest thing for you to get out of, because that's the thing you've been most hypnotized to believe is what you are, is your physical body. And that's been embedded in your brain. It's been embedded in your nervous system, right? So you can't just shake it off. You can't just shake that off. But then the question becomes, how many people have the audacity? You see, if you do take these teachings and practices to be the truth, how many people have the audacity to then make a commitment to this process, understanding that it will mean your annihilation? See, that's what happens, because once the system that you take yourself to be as a personality starts to get the idea, oh, wait a minute, I have to die in order for me to realize this truth. As soon as the system catches that, right, it starts to resist. It starts to avoid. It starts to get very reasonable. It starts to say, oh, yeah, maybe I'll go to a retreat someday. Well, the personality, see, this is the thing. The personality is not really real, but the personality is real in terms of it being an activity in your mind. It's real in that regard, right? So it's not real and it's not real, right? It's an activity in your mind. The question is, given that activity has the power to terrify you, given that activity has the power to really corner you, and bring out patterns of behavior and patterns of emotions and patterns of thoughts that are designed to resist the possibility that you are going to die. That stuff will come up and play. That's one of the reasons that that the mind is so difficult to deal with is because it knows exactly what to present you with because it knows what you believe. It'll present you with things that you won't argue with or deny because they're your beliefs. You know what I mean? How are you going to deny something that you believe, right? Well, the only way you're going to deny something that you believe is you're going to have to examine the belief. You have to examine the belief with an open mind and be willing to see that the belief is not the truth. And then if you see the belief is not the truth, will you begin to live consistent with what you've discovered? That's the question. How many people have the audacity to do that? It does take audacity. It really takes a willingness to die.
It's a process, though, right?
Yeah, it's a process.
So you're in the middle of it.
No, I don't think I'm in the middle of it anymore. I think I'm past the middle of it, right? But most people are in the beginning of it. You know, I mean, I've been at this for a long time. And there were many years. See, this is one of the reasons that I have compassion for the process that people are in, because there were many years that I thought that the intellectual and conceptual understanding was enough. It felt good to me. Felt good to me that I knew the truth, right? Felt good to me that I knew the truth. But the truth conceptually has no power, has no value. It's just a concept. Until that truth is something that you bring into your living of your life, moment to moment, where you begin to examine the difference between what the mental process is telling you and what reality is. When you have that kind of a commitment where you're living your life moment to moment, paying attention in such a way where you're no longer believing what's not true, you lose interest in it because it can't get you anywhere. It can't produce what you're after. What you're after is an experience of peace. That experience of peace is always available, but not as long as you're allowing yourself to partake in this story that's being generated in your head all day long. You've got to be able to start to pay attention to the story and see that it is not true, that what it's saying is not the truth. It's not an easy process because almost 8 billion people believe it is. How do I know that? Watch the news. That's all. The news makes it very clear that almost 8 billion people on this planet believe that they're under threat by the people next to them, by the country next to them, right? So it's not an easy process to involve yourself in. However, it works if you're willing to generate the audacity to go through the process.